Hey everyone, it's Janice from the Divorcing Religion podcast. I'm excited to tell you that my book is now for sale. It's called Divorcing Religion, a memoir and survival handbook, and I'll make sure you have a link in the notes for that. And also I want to encourage you to like, subscribe, and become a member of my YouTube channel. Take care. Hey everyone, welcome to the Divorcing Religion podcast. I'm your host, Janice Selby. I'm a registered professional counselor and a religious trauma recovery coach. My guest today is Lonnie Mann. Lonnie grew up in Orthodox Jewish in New York. It's a strict, difficult lifestyle for anyone. But Lonnie found additional challenges growing up as he realized he was gay and struggled to reconcile his faith and sexuality. Ultimately, Lonnie managed to leave the community. Eventually, he wrote a graphic novel about his experiences with his partner, Ryan Gatts, providing the artwork. Lonnie's book is called Gaytheist, Coming Out of My Orthodox Childhood. Now, I had the opportunity to read a couple of chapters online, and I really got into it. It's a compelling story that I want to finish. So check out today's show notes for links to learn more, read a couple of chapters for free, and buy Lonnie's book. Welcome, Lonnie.
Hello. It's a pleasure to be here.
Oh, I'm so glad. I see your book even right behind you there. And that cover art even is so compelling. You're really fortunate to have a partner who is also so artistic.
Yeah, we actually drew it together. I had written it, and originally I was drawing it myself. And there's a several-year process of getting an agent and pitching to publishers and getting a lot of no thank yous, and then rewriting it for 3 years. And eventually my partner, who is a better technical artist than I am, suggested we try collaborating on the art instead of me doing it all myself. And so we did a little experiment, just like a test of one page. And I was like, well, I mean, if the whole book could look like this, that would be amazing. So we did the rest of the prologue, which is just 4 pages. And I was like, I mean, if you're into it, I'm into it. I think this could be great. So yeah, then for the next couple of years, it was a process of me doing very, very, very rough, like stick figure kind of layouts, and then them doing very nice, cleaned up, like pencils, and then me going over those in inks. It's all digital, but like using the terminology. And then I would also do the color, and then for more complex like lighting and nighttime scenes and stuff, then they would do a second pass on the color. So it was really a lot of handing it back and forth.
Wow. And boy, oh boy, so by the time it was finally published, both you and your partner really knew your story very, very
yes well. We spent a lot of time with it. Yeah.
Excellent. Well, I was so pleased when you reached out to me about potentially being a guest on the show, because I think your story is one that needs to be told. We have people listening from all around the world listening to this podcast, coming out of every background, including Orthodox Jewish people, and I think it's really important for us all to see people that kind of reflect who we are in our own experiences. So I'm glad to have you here. Yes. And you tell us a little bit then about growing up in New York in this ultra conservative community. I mean, you're born into it. You don't know anything else.
Yeah. I grew up in this interesting kind of corner of Judaism where it's within Judaism, there are many different sects, and they can be all the way from purely cultural, no real belief in God, not really religion, just, community and traditions, all the way to even much, much more stricter than how I grew up, which is called ultra-Orthodox. And even within that, there are many different sects of ultra-Orthodoxy. So it's really, really, there's so many little slices that differ. And when you look at each end of the spectrum, they're like completely, completely different. And so my corner was called modern Orthodoxy, which meant that we had most of the really extreme rules around what you can and can't eat, around the Sabbath every week. It's a 25-hour period where you can't do things like use any electronics, you can't cook, you can't turn on and off lights, you can't drive or buy or sell things. It's a whole laundry list of rules you have to follow every single week. But on the other hand, when I wasn't, at the synagogue or in school, we wore jeans or shorts, t-shirts. We went to movies. So like you said, I grew up in New York on Long Island, outside the city. But a couple times a year, we would go into the city and see a Broadway musical or go to the museum. So I was growing up watching Nickelodeon and like those sorts of kids shows in America. But it was really like I went to an all boys, completely Orthodox Jewish school system. We had no friends or family or anyone who wasn't Orthodox Jewish, like even just less religious Jewish, nobody. So my entire actual social world, everyone I interacted with every day was Orthodox, but I had this window through TV and then eventually the internet into what would seem to be mainstream American society, quote unquote, if that's a thing that exists. And so it really felt like I was American, but I wasn't really in America,
Mm-hmm.
and just kind of imagining, what must it be like to grow up as a normal American kid kind of thing. So it's like, I could see everything I was missing constantly. There were always commercials for all of the fast food restaurants that I wasn't allowed to go to. We couldn't eat anywhere that wasn't Orthodox Jewish owned, so like,
Wow.
I had never tried bacon or shrimp until I was in college. Like many things like that. Yeah.
Wow. And so I think when I was reading through the prologue and maybe first chapter of your book, it seemed that at some point you were made aware in your childhood that about what it meant to be homosexual and that it was not allowed. Was very definitely something we don't do.
Very definitely.
And
Yes.
so, I mean, is that like in grade 4 or like at what time are they kind of introducing such concepts? Or did those things come up on TV for you as well?
Yeah, it's a great question. So my earliest memory of learning the terminology was, I think, in 6th grade. It's actually a scene in the book. And a friend of mine at the time was just sort of like explaining, gay guys are attracted to they're attracted to other guys, and straight people are attracted. Straight people are normal, they're attracted to the opposite sex. But and then like bi people are attracted, but like breaking down the terminology, which I didn't know before. Like things like gay were thrown around as a slur, right? Like as a derogatory, but I didn't actually know what that meant. I had already known I liked looking at other boys. Like that was engraved in as far back as I can remember. I just didn't know it was strange. Like, I mean, even in 1st grade, like I had a favorite Power Ranger on TV. It's like, oh, Tommy's the coolest one. Like I just used the term coolest because I didn't really know what it meant to like have a crush on a celebrity or whatever.
Yes.
And then eventually it was like, oh, okay, this is what that is. Not everyone feels this way, kind of thing. And then ultimately, as I got older, those kinds of subject matter were maybe deemed more appropriate, more age appropriate in terms of talking about, the sorts of people who are no good, who are, the reason God punishes humanity or what have you, Sodom and Gomorrah, et cetera, et cetera. Then those would eventually come up as well. The school system I went to had a dual curriculum of religious subjects and secular classes. So at the beginning of the day, when you got there at like 8 in the morning, there would be morning prayer, which would be 30, 45 minutes, depending on the day, because it varied. And then very short period for breakfast, like 15 minutes. And then the whole morning of like 4 classes would be, let's say, Bible or Talmud or prophets or like other religious texts, and we would study them in the ancient Hebrew or Aramaic, and that was all the way till lunch, which I think was about 12:45 or 1:15, something like that. And then after lunch in the afternoon, we would have math and science and social studies and the regular secular subjects. So the school days were very long. They would go at least until 6 or so, I think. And we also had school on Sundays, but Fridays and Sundays were half days where we only did Jewish subjects. We didn't do secular subjects. So ultimately, we didn't actually have as many days per year to study the stuff that we would have the state tests for at the end of the year. But we still had tests and homework and everything in those Jewish classes as well. So I would be having to memorize vocabulary lists of ancient Hebrew, or remember in these complex ancient legal situations, this rabbi thought that this was the opinion, and that rabbi disagreed and thought for this reason that was their opinion. And, we would have tests on this stuff.
Children had to be learning that.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
Incredible. It's a lot of pressure.
A lot of pressure. Yeah. It was stressful.
And did you actually learn to read Aramaic and all the other languages in addition to English?
Well, we all learned the Hebrew alphabet and the English alphabet at the same time in kindergarten. And then in first grade, we learned, cursive in English. And we also learned another kind of Hebrew script that certain ancient commentators wrote their commentary in, which was still written in Hebrew, but it was written in this kind of other alphabet that was similar but different.
Wow.
So phonetically, we learned very, very early on how to read this stuff. But I didn't really learn how to just kind of read on my own. I didn't learn it as a language that I could just kind of go off and read or speak on my own. It was really always just kind of a word by word studying situation. And there were certain vocabulary that would come up all the time that you'd remember. But I think part of that had to do with the quality of my particular yeshiva being a term for an Orthodox Jewish school. Because when I went from middle school to high school, I went to a different yeshiva, and I definitely had classmates from sort of that one's middle school that had learned much better than me the actual languages, the actual ancient languages. So I was required to take modern Hebrew as a language class in 9th grade, and that was really the first time I actually learned how to speak any of it, and wasn't just kind of going word by word in the book and being this is what this word means, this is what this word means, this is what this sentence means, kind of thing. But I was terrible at it. I thought I was really bad at languages, actually, because I was so bad at learning Hebrew. They said, the state test at the end of the year is so easy, nobody gets less than a 95 on that. I got a 75. So I passed, but barely. And then eventually in college, I actually decided to see what Japanese was like, and found it really interesting and fun. And I was like, oh, okay, it's not languages. It was just Hebrew, I guess, that I wasn't into. So yeah.
That's so cool. That's amazing. Boy, I just think of all the brain synapses that must have been firing when they're trying to instill all these different languages and lessons into your brain. And at some point you are realizing, so not only are you living differently than the rest of the world, you're seeing that through TV, having access to TV.
Yeah.
But then you also start ingesting the message that it's not okay to be gay. But as you grow into adolescence, you're realizing, oh, wow, this actually, I do seem to identify or relate to being attracted to males. How is this going to work out? Is that... Were you then, do you just go inside yourself and it's a time of fear, not wanting to be found out? Or what on earth does an adolescent kid do? Yeah.
Yeah. So there's definitely a ton of fear about, falling out of the closet by mistake, being found out. Would I get kicked out of school? Would I be disowned by my family? Who knows? Right. There's very scary. I sincerely believed in the religion when I was little. I've always been, pretty into rules and structure. So I grew up as a rules follower, and, the rabbis we were taught by rabbis for all these school subjects. So they would tell all these stories about, these horror stories about people who stopped being religious or stopped believing in God or claimed they stopped believing in God, and, the terrible tragedies that befell them. And they were all depressed, drug addicts, alcoholics, yada, yada, yada. So I bought it. I had no reason not to believe this stuff. I trusted these leaders and all that authority figures. And so at first, really, it was being gay was the main motivation for me to learn a lot more about the religion. And it was taught as such a like a monolith, like this is how it is, this is how it's always been. But as soon as you scratch the surface, you see how much it's evolved over the years, over the thousands of years, and how completely different as a religion, like modern Orthodox Judaism is from, let's say, how it might have been practiced in biblical times, and the more you learn about how it's not permanently, like how it hasn't always been exactly this way, infallible, and like God created it to be practiced in this way, and it's always been practiced in this way, and actually it's been changed and over time by humans, by rabbis and what have you. The more I learned about that, the more I continued to research and search for answers, and how can this make sense, and how can a merciful, loving God be this way, yada yada. And through the course of high school, I went from completely believing in Orthodox Judaism to feeling like, okay, well, I still believe in Judaism and God, but like maybe Orthodox Judaism isn't like biblically accurate. Maybe something like conservative Judaism, which is not a political term in this case. It's actually another sect that's less strictly adherent. Maybe that's more accurate to biblical Judaism for this, that, the other kind of reason. And then eventually it was like, well, maybe it's not, like maybe Judaism isn't the one true religion, but I still believe in God. Until eventually it was like, okay, I think I'm agnostic. I'm not 100% sure, but like you can't disprove that God exists. And then in college, I was actually when the God Delusion came out. And when I don't have a lot of good things to say about its author, but when I finished reading that book, I felt like I finally had permission to admit to myself, like, oh, not only do I not believe in God, but there's no reason to believe in God. And like, I'm completely done. Like,
wow.
Okay, phew, I don't need to worry about this anymore at all. Like, it's over.
So then what was it like living in your family that was still, fairly Orthodox as you're discovering these things about yourself and having these questions about the religion? Was it safe at all for you at home to express your questions or concerns to anyone?
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. No. They bill themselves as very not only open to questions, but loving questions. And it's all about, like, they say that Judaism is all about asking questions and trying to prove it wrong, and then seeing how, like, oh, all the answers are right there. But really, it's only about asking the right questions, the right kinds of questions that don't actually dig too deep, and just taking whatever answers are already prescribed at face value without really thinking about them too much. And mostly these answers don't really answer the questions. They don't really address anything. And a lot of the times there are, even when you're studying Talmud, which is basically many volumes of ancient debates about interpretations of the laws in the Torah, in the 5 books of Moses, there are many different opinions, and somebody might come up with a question that nobody can answer, and then in this situation, a question without an answer, they just take that as further evidence of God's existence, because rather than thinking, oh, I found an inconsistency, a fallacy, a place where it just doesn't make sense, because this is all made up by people and it's morphed over the years and all that, instead they say, oh, wow, we truly can't understand God's logic because, like, he has such a higher
ways are
being.
higher than our ways. Yeah,
exactly. It's beyond human comprehension, not because it simply doesn't make any sense, which is Occam's razor in this situation, but because we can't comprehend it. So, oh wow, God is even more impressive than we thought. Incredible. So
wow,
it's like
the
really
wrong takeaway to get from that.
Exactly. So no, you especially, like, I'm sure there are other families that are much more open to real questions and real debates and real conversation, but my family was not. My family was very much about the rules and, not questioning things.
And do you have siblings?
I do. I have two older brothers. Yeah.
Older brothers. Okay.
Yeah, I don't really have a relationship with my immediate family anymore, unfortunately.
Yeah. Hopefully you'll tell us a little bit about that. So you managed to all the questions locked tightly inside of you to feel safe within your family and your school. And then when you graduated from the correct number of years in the yeshiva, then you went to public college or university?
Yeah, I did. So I managed to convince my parents to let me go to college in Arizona. I moved from New York to Arizona, and I was going to study video game design. Because,
oh my gosh.
Yes, well, so growing up, like I said, we had access to TV, and I played video games and used the internet and all that. So it was really this strange combination of like things that I couldn't access and things that I could access. And so I was very into video games. They were a great escape for me growing up. And in college, I ended up getting scared off from the industry because it's a very difficult industry to work in, terrible hours, very low pay. Like, not going to get into all that. But basically, I was like, I don't think I do want to get into this. So I ended up switching to a different, more graphic design-y kind of career track. But I was physically separated from my parents, by many miles. And I had to agree to go to a local Jewish, what's called a Chabad, which is an organization that is ultra-Orthodox, but they set up usually on or near college campuses as a resource for Jewish students to go and participate in prayers, rituals, Sabbath meals, holiday meals, learn more about the religion. And although it is a proselytization exercise, although I don't know if you can exactly call it that, because Jews don't proselytize to non-Jews. They believe if your mother was Jewish, you're Jewish, and almost like it's a genetic thing, and you can't become un-Jewish. So whether or not you practice the religion, it's like embedded. Although you can technically convert to Judaism, so don't worry about it. Like, you get a second special soul if you convert. But so they were very non-judgmental, extremely non-judgmental, and so that's great. But I did have to go every weekend for the prayers and the Sabbath meals and everything. And my mom would call the rabbi's wife to surreptitiously check in on me. Like, the rabbi's wife didn't realize this is what the calls were. She thought my mom was just calling to be social and nice and oh, thanks for looking after Lonnie. But even though I was expected to call my mom multiple times a week, on my own, she was also calling to make sure that I was actually going every week, So although I was separated and I could do a lot of stuff without them knowing, hanging out with all of my new non-Jewish friends and eating things that weren't kosher or whatever, they were still making sure that I was at least doing the things that they could be checking in on.
Right.
But although I hadn't completely stopped believing in Orthodox Judaism before I went to college, I had eventually decided that, so in Orthodox Judaism, there's they separate all the commandments or the things you need to follow into two main categories. The things that are supposed to be between a human and another human, don't kill, don't steal, give to charity, that kind of stuff. And the things that are between a human and God, pray, keep the religious rules, like don't eat the wrong foods, that kind of stuff. So I was thinking to myself, okay, well, if I abandon all the between man and God kind of stuff, and I ignore all those rules and just live like a normal person, normal non-religious person, and I'm a good, decent person, like I do all the between human and human stuff, and I'm nice and I don't kill or steal or all that stuff, then, I can hopefully eventually find a relationship. And if I meet God and he exists, whatever, do whatever you
understand.
do whatever you want, I can't be burdened with your nonsense at this point. Like, if you really think that I need to be punished for that stuff, then okay, whatever. It's kind of like how I had come down with the logic, especially because there's a belief that if you go to hell in Orthodox Judaism, you can't go for more than 12 months. So after someone dies, their immediate family members say a special prayer 3 times a day, in like a quorum of people, like at a synagogue, for your immediate family member to try and like beseech God to let you move on to heaven from hell sooner. And so this is called Kaddish. You may have heard of Kaddish. It's a special prayer. And the reason they only do it for 11 months of the first year of mourning period, because Judaism is very focused on like trying to prevent rumor mongering and like assuming everyone's always talking about everyone behind their backs and all that, which is not. It's a very universal human cultural thing. It's not unique to Judaism, obviously, but they only do it for 11 months in order to not imply to anyone that you think that your family member was so bad that they might be there for the full year. So you don't do the full year of Kaddish, you just do 11 months. There's a lot of that silly nonsense in Judaism.
Superstition.
Oh, there's so much superstition, let me tell you. But anyway, I was basically like, okay, a lifetime of loneliness is not worth preventing potentially 1 year, whatever that means, whatever that could, supernaturally or metaphysically mean of hell. Whatever it might be, let it come, let it happen. I'll deal with it when I deal with it.
Wow,
so I decided to stop being observant before I actually completely lost my faith, and then I did lose my faith. So it worked out. It worked out great.
And this was all in Arizona still when you were at school?
Yeah, I think by the time I went to college, I was already agnostic, so I really wasn't like worried. But even back in high school, I was like, once I finish high school, or once I go to college, at least once I'm outside the oversight of my parents,
right,
I'm done with this. I'm going to eat what I want. I'm going to try to find a boyfriend,
Yeah. So then which conversation came first? I'm not going to follow your Jewish requirements anymore. Or by the way, also, I am attracted to men. Like which one? Or was it all at the same time?
Well, so I came out to my parents when I was in 10th grade. And that was a huge mistake. And it was because I was really depressed about this boy I had a huge crush on at my school. And like, I didn't really know him. And, it's like, I wanted to get to know him, but like, it never really worked out. Anyway, I was just like full of teen angst and, just very gloomy. And my dad was just like getting angry at me for acting like a teenager, essentially, because he is, a very emotionally immature individual. And eventually it was, we were having a barbecue like behind our house at the end of the summer, like beginning of the school year in the fall before it got too cold. And I remember like my older brother was there and his at the time fiance. And eventually my dad was just like, you're not going inside until you tell me what's wrong. And so, we sat out there and everyone else went inside and the sun set and it got really cold. And like, eventually I was just trying to like buy time and get inside. I was like, can we at least go to my room, go inside? And he's like, are you going to tell me? And I was like, yeah, I didn't actually know whether I would. But once I got to my room, my hands just kind of moved on their own. And I, wrote on a little like corner of a notebook paper, I'm gay, and I tore it off and handed it to him and started crying. And then he comforted me, and I was fooled for a moment. Yes. Well, the thing is, because he wasn't actually taking it seriously. He thought I was just like a late bloomer, like he was, or whatever. So he didn't actually think that I was gay. He was like, oh, stupid baby, it's going to be okay.
You'll get over it. Yeah.
Just like coddling, So at that point, I had already been reading a lot of essays from people about their coming out experiences online and other sorts of articles, for closeted gay boys. So I was like, oh, this response, like, this is one of the classic templates. I've read about this.
Okay.
All right. I see. Okay. So basically I was like, all right, well, don't tell mom yet. Like, I don't want you to tell her like before I do. And I think it was like that winter. So just a couple months later, I ended up telling my mom, and she she had an even wilder response. She was like, "Oh, Lonnie, I never told you this, but I actually go see a psychic in Brooklyn who reads tea leaves, and she told me that you're not gay, so don't worry about it." And so little did I know, she had been
dear.
reading my diary, so
Oh.
she knew, or at least she was like, "Oh, Lonnie thinks he's gay." But my psychic told me he's not, so it's fine. So it's like, all right, dum-dums. Like
That is
you're
such
just,
a violation of your privacy, by the
I
way. If any
know.
parents are listening and they're considering doing that, please think twice before you invade your child's
Strong
personal,
agree.
private space like that. Yeah.
Strong agree. Kids
Wow.
are people. They are not property. You do not own them. They are their own individuals.
And also, reads lie. Reads yes. I mean, wow. Okay. So
Yeah.
she's like, well, no, you only think you are, but you're really not, because my very knowledgeable psychic assures me that
Yeah.
that's not the case. So in
Um,
your later teens, you already had this conversation with them before you went away to
yes.
college.
Yes. Now, I had thought just coming out as gay would imply very strongly that, okay, I mean, of course I'm not going to remain religious. Like, people don't do that. Like, like we can all assume what this means, right? Anyway, as it turns out, no, they could not assume what it meant. And as it turns out, there are plenty of people who are gay and remain Orthodox Jewish. There are gay men and lesbians who get married on purpose in order to stay religious, stay in the community, have kids. And they're like, this is our religious duty. We're going to do this because, it's expected of us from God. There are people who remain celibate for their whole lives. So although I had assumed what I thought was logical, which is that if you're gay, you would just stop being religious. My parents did not share that perspective. So for them, it was very much like, okay, so you're gay. So what? That doesn't mean you get to stop being religious. Like, what are you talking about? Like, that was a crazy idea to them. And for me, I didn't really know, like, I didn't have any response to that. I'm like, there's a fundamental breakdown in our sort of perspectives here. Like,
Yeah. Mhm.
we're looking at the same picture and seeing two different things. So,
Right. So how
yeah.
long was it then? Were you well into your adulthood, your young adulthood, when you finally said to them, actually, I don't believe any of this stuff?
It was actually, let's see. So when I was in college, about a year into college, in the fall, there are three like major Jewish holidays that last a while, and it's like the Sabbath in that you can't use electronics or go to work or all that kind of stuff. And I had a 20-hour a week part-time job, and I was taking like 21 credits. I had a very full workload at
Wow.
school. So
Yeah.
I was very busy, and I was like, I can't just miss like 3 weeks of work in school. Like, I'll fail my classes, I'll lose my job. Like, I wanted, I was so strongly trying to have a mature, just adult to adult relationship with my parents,
Yeah.
which they were completely incapable of.
Mhm.
Because
Were you
for
living
them,
with them at the time?
no, I was in Arizona and
Oh,
they were
good.
in New
Okay.
York, and
All right.
I was going back in between semesters
I
to
see.
visit, but I, they very much view children as property, and that,
Mm-hmm.
they get to tell you what to do with your life, what to do with your body, how to live your life.
Mm-hmm.
So, but I was trying little by little to, just through honesty and frankness, be like, look, this is who I am. I'm not doing this to hurt you. I am not doing this because I haven't thought it through. Like, I'm being mindful and, but
You were being the
if you,
grown up in the room.
yes, well, that's absolutely always been my experience is growing up. It's the situation where the child has to parent the parent in a lot of ways.
Yes.
um yeah, I could go a lot deeper into that side of things, but for now we'll just leave that, and I'll say that I was basically, look, I don't think I can keep these holidays this year. I'll try to go to the Chabad, to the services, the prayers, as much as I can, but I got to go to class. I got to go to school, or I got to go to work. And they reacted extremely negatively. There was a lot of there were voicemails with screaming and cursing and very angry emails, and basically they threatened to cut me off. They were like, if you don't keep the holidays, we're not going to continue paying for school.
Wow.
But no, they were very generously, paying for tuition and stuff. And at that point, I was like, okay, there's no real way for me to pay for this expensive technical school I'm going to, and continue going through college and all that, living on my own, working at Oshkosh Bagosh,
Yeah.
And so I immediately started looking into loans and talking to financial aid and trying to figure out what potential options I might have. And then that weekend, I was at the Chabad, like I always had to be. And I'd always had like a nice, friendly relationship with the rabbi's wife. I found her very easy to talk to. I would help her in the kitchen, like prepare the big meal for everyone. But they were under the impression that I was Orthodox because I grew up Orthodox. And I was, besides them and their kid, their like little kid, I was supposedly the only Orthodox person there. Everyone else was, from the local area, from the college campus. They didn't really know what Orthodox Judaism was. They were like, wow, matzo ball soup. I heard of this, but it was very introductory for everyone else, whereas I had obviously grown up in it. So they didn't know I was gay, and they didn't know I wasn't actually Orthodox on my own time, because I would wear my yarmulke when I went over and all that. So anyway, that night I was just like, to the rabbi's wife, I was like, hey, can we talk? And she was like, yeah, of course. What's up? Is something wrong? And I just told her everything. I was like, look, I'm gay. I'm not actually Orthodox, although I did grow up that way. I haven't actually been observant since I came to Arizona. And now I'm being threatened to be cut off by my parents because of the holidays. And she was like, you don't have to come here if you don't want to come here. I'm like, you don't seem to understand. I do. Like, it's not because you're forcing me. It's my parents. And she was like, Lonnie, the most important thing is that you're happy. Please, you really don't have to come here if you don't want to. And I was like, when my mom calls you, she's partially calling to make sure I'm coming. Like,
right.
If she calls up and explicitly says, like, has Lonnie been here for the holidays? Would you like fly for me? Like, of course not, right? But she thought about it for a second, and she was like, yeah, don't worry about it. Like, I got you. And
wow.
Boom, head explode. Incredible. Totally unforeseen, totally wild. So at that point, I just told my parents, like, yeah, okay, you win. I'm going to keep all these holidays and not go to school or whatever for those periods of time. When in actuality, I was going to school. I was going to work. And they saved my life in some ways, at the very least, they saved my college experience and career, ultimate future career and all that. It was shocking. So like, there's really like, look, I'm very against religion in general, but I can at least say that I've had some very, very positive experiences with Chabad specifically.
Oh, I'm so glad. Okay. And so then how much longer did you have to pretend to your folks?
Well, let's see. I went into college with some credits from AP classes in high school, and I went year round. So each summer was like another semester. So I think ultimately I was there for like 2 and a third years to get that 4-year bachelor's, just because of like how the calendar worked out. So yeah, about that amount of time. And I ended up taking 3 Japanese classes and learned about a whole industry of English teaching in Japan, which I hadn't known about, and decided, this is the best time to go to another country and have this experience. I've got no relationship or like pets or, property or anything like that. Yeah, exactly. So I, to make a long story short, I got a job offer in Japan. It was not that easy, but I did get one. And so, yeah, after I finished school, I moved to Japan and taught English for about 1.25 years. And at that point, I had true freedom. I had financial independence. And at that point, it was really a matter of like, if my parents send me an email and it's not nice, I'm not going to respond to it. It's really like balls in their court in that regard. And very shortly after I got there, this was many years before like the big Fukushima earthquake, but there was a big earthquake when I got there. This was in 2007. It was far away from where I lived. I felt it a little bit, but there's absolutely no actual damage or anything in my immediate area. But they don't know anything about Japanese geography. They didn't understand anything about like where in Japan I was living or anything like that. So for all they knew, I was at the epicenter. So, that day, like I woke up, I went to work, I came home, I eventually checked my email, and there were all these emails from them being like, Lonnie, are you alive? Oh, this isn't funny. You have to reply to the email.
Oh, no.
And I think at least for a while, that was a little bit of a wake-up call to them of like, hey, if you don't treat me nicely and I stop responding to you, there's no way for you to even know if I'm alive or dead. So like, what are you going to do? How are you going to act? It lasted a little while, but, eventually things declined again. They're also very politically conservative. So yeah, I eventually cut contact with them at the end of 2016 for reasons.
For reasons, exactly. And that's your whole family. That's them and your brothers. And so
my brothers are just for other reasons. They're not particularly religious like my parents. But we've never really. They're a number of years older than me, and they're very different sorts of people. They are very politically conservative, but they're not like very, very religious. So it's complicated. But I don't really keep up with my immediate family anymore.
Yeah. There's no guarantee that we are going to be close to the family that we are born in or raised in, just because that's the family we're born and raised in. And I tell a lot of my clients that once you reach the age of majority, your parents' job is finished. Their job was to raise you safely to reach adulthood. Hooray, you made it. And then at that point, they are in our lives by invitation only. And that invitation can be rescinded if there is toxicity. Yes. And it's sometimes hard for people to wrap their minds around that, but it is absolutely true. So then you're in Japan, and is that where you met your partner?
No, I didn't meet my partner until, let's see, so this was 2007, 2008. Then I moved back to New York and lived there for about 6 years. And then I moved to Seattle, and I met my partner in Seattle. And that was almost 10 years ago. And so I lived in Seattle for about 8 years, and we ended up getting married right before we moved to Japan 2 years ago. So I had lived in Japan for a little over a year, a decade and a half prior. And I moved back to the US because, as it turns out, I didn't really like teaching English. The pay was very low. It was stressful. I didn't really have the time or energy or money to enjoy being in Japan. So I was like, this is, I wanted to stay and get a creative job here, but I didn't have the resources to either get my Japanese level to a high enough point where I could actually get a creative job at a Japanese company, or my portfolio and creative skills up to a level where I could potentially get a job on an English-speaking team at an international company. So I couldn't really do either of those things by staying put. So I went back to the US, and I was like, maybe one day, maybe I can come back eventually. And as it turns out, ultimately, I was able to a couple of years ago. And so we've been living here for a couple of years now.
Wow. And how does Ryan like it? Because that's a pretty big change in culture.
Yeah. Well, we have a lot of common interests, and they were already very interested in Japan and a lot of associated pop cultural kind of things. They had been here one time on a school trip. They were studying animation in college, and they took a course with the comics department, actually, and they had a 2-week trip to Tokyo where they visited various animation studios and things like that, and they loved it. So that was the only time they had been here before we met. And then while we were dating, we ended up taking a few trips here together, just, vacations. So we had ended up being in Japan together on trips multiple times over the course of those 8 years.
Wow.
And then, ultimately, we moved here.
I like it. That's such a beautiful ending. That's so wonderful.
Thank you.
And so do you think you folks will stay there for the time being?
Definitely for the time being, yeah. We don't have any particular plans to leave. We just moved apartments because leases here tend to be 2 years on average rather than 1 year. So we had a lease for our first 2 years, and we just moved to a different neighborhood. So we have a new 2-year lease. And yeah, we definitely don't have any particular interest in living in the US again anytime soon.
So this is not the time to go back. Things are a little bit crazy over there.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, I haven't had any interest in living in America for a very long time personally. Who knows if we'll stay in Japan forever or if we end up going to some English-speaking country. But for now, we definitely. It's obviously not without challenges, it's not all peaches and cream, but there's a lot of stuff we love about living here.
How cool. That is so neat. Would you show us your book? I see it just behind you on your table there. Just to give everyone a nice look at it. Oh, that's so good. Yes, that's awesome. What was the most challenging part of creating it? Exactly. Look at they're even in full color. That is awesome. Beautiful.
Hopefully an ebook will come out next year. But for now, it's just physical. But you can ask for it at any bookstore. They can order it. Your local library might have a copy. It's worth looking into. And if they don't, you could always request that they get a copy. And that's always a help. Your local libraries are to be supported. But the most challenging part, you asked about creating it.
Like, was it cathartic or was it awful dredging up the memories?
Oh, it was both. It was a lot of both. There were so many times when I would be drawing a page and I would have to stop in the middle and go to the other room to my partner and be like, this is so crazy. Can you believe that I grew up this way? This is wacky. Because, you separate yourself from it and time passes and you don't think about it for a while. And not having been in that situation, in that moment, in that context for so long, and then thinking about it, people live this way. I lived this way. It blows my mind all over again. So I had a lot of moments like that. There was definitely a lot of negative emotions as I'm going through and thinking about various situations. There's a scene in the book where this was, I think I was in 11th grade, probably. I was going to get my learner's permit for driving, or maybe my driver's license, I forget. Anyway, my mom's driving me to the DMV, Department of Motor Vehicles, and the summer after 10th grade, I had gone to a quote unquote performing arts camp out on Long Island, and I didn't do dancing or singing or music playing or whatever. I did web design and painting and drawing. But it was the first time I had been to a non-Orthodox Jewish camp. So, 99% of the people there were not Orthodox Jewish. It's Long Island, so there were a lot of Jewish people there, but I think maybe I saw one other yarmulke in the whole camp. It was a day camp, so I would, go there and back on a bus each day. And I made non-Orthodox friends. I made LGBT friends, and I made one of my lifelong friends, who is in the book. Her name is Michelle, and it was really, really freeing. It was really wonderful. But so I kept up with her online through AOL Instant Messenger back in the day. Yeah. And so we would chat regularly after school at night, between the summer after 10th grade when we met and then the eventual coming summer after 11th grade. I hadn't seen her in person at all since then, but we kept up online. We were just, friends. We only lived a couple towns over from each other. And on Long Island, like that's very, very close. Maybe a 5-minute drive. So,
Okay.
I wanted to hang out with her the next summer as well, and hopefully with some of her friends who I hadn't met, who were also non-Orthodox. And so I was asking my mom if I could hang out with her, like if I could have permission to hang out with her that summer. And she was like, well, I believe that you're very responsible, so I don't think you would like do anything wrong. But do you think you would be tempted to, if they're all going out to McDonald's or something, go and eat non-kosher or whatever? And I was like, I don't think I would really be affected by the peer pressure. But also, like at this point, I thought that this was still just obvious and implied. I was like, but also like, I'm not going to be Orthodox my whole life. Like I'm not going to be Orthodox after I move out. Like we're all on the same page here about that, right? Like I didn't think this was news. I thought I had come out earlier that year.
Oh dear.
Or not earlier that year, like over a year before, because this was towards the end of 11th grade. And I'd come out in 10th grade. So I was like, come on, you've had some time to think about this, right? Like,
ooh.
And she freaked out. This is a scene in the book as well, but she really, really freaked out. She's like, I can't believe you're just dropping this bombshell on me. Like, I'm supposed to think this is just normal. Like, obvious. And, going through and drawing those sorts of scenes, really dredging those memories back up. And, just kind of being angry at my parents for being the ways that they are. And obviously they've got their own indoctrinations and their own baggage and trauma and all that. But the effect it has in the end on me is not something I necessarily have to forgive them for, like
right.
Obviously their intention with all this is to protect my immortal soul and all that. But, intent is not effect, or I forget exactly how that phrase goes, but, at that point, I don't really care that they had the best intentions. They were still, they're still hurting me and behaving in very unfair and immature, indoctrinated ways.
And this is one reason also why I feel like it's important for us to share about your life and your book, because you are someone who has been able to walk away from your religion and, even sadly leave your family behind because they were unwilling to progress and continue this journey with you. And you're not in the gutter. You're in a beautiful, amazing country, living your best life with a wonderful partner. And I want people to feel encouraged if they're facing some of these things that feel daunting to them. Take a deep breath, take one step at a time. It is possible for you to build a life that's meaningful and happy for you. It doesn't matter if it's meaningful and happy for other people. You are the one in charge of your own life. You're the most powerful person you know, despite what a religion may have taught you.
Strongly, strongly agree. And for a very long time, I couldn't even consider cutting contact because of how strongly I was indoctrinated, or indoctrinated might not be the right term for this, but how strongly I was convinced that it would be so hurtful to my parents to cut them off, that I didn't want to, be such a terrible person as to, cause someone else so much pain. And I couldn't comprehend for a long time that, of course, like, I don't owe them that. And you don't need to keep negative, toxic, hurtful people in your life, even if you share genes with them. Like, I never asked for any of this. I never asked to be born in the first place. They didn't consult me, So fortunately, eventually I was able to, after reading a lot of really good books like Toxic Parents and other materials for adult survivors of narcissistic parents, and other sorts of things like that, I got a lot of much better perspectives on things along those
Oh
lines.
boy. Yeah. And I swapped out the 10 commandments for the 10 humanist commitments, which you can see behind me, and they are far superior to the religious 10 commandments. Lonnie, how can people find you?
Well, if you want to see a few free chapters of the book, you can go to lonniecomics.com. I am on all the social medias as Lonnie Comics, so just my first name, Lonnie, and then the word comics. So Blue Sky, Instagram, whatever. You can search and find me there. And just to go back to your previous point for a moment, in terms of becoming independent and leaving toxic religions and high demand religions, I would just say the one most important goal is to figure out how you can achieve financial independence. And that is a huge challenge, especially depending on what country you're in. But that is the first step, because if you can live without the financial support of your parents, or whatever structure you're living in, then that is the ultimate freedom. And I know, at least within Orthodox Judaism, a lot of people are kept in place not only due to support by parents or immediate family, but because the whole community structure is such that if you leave, you lose all your safety nets, you lose all of your job networking opportunities, you lose your whole community and everything like that. And it can really be a huge shock and a huge setback. There's some very good memoirs from folks who left Orthodox Judaism and dealt with those sorts of challenges, and especially people who were much even more extreme, like ultra Orthodox sects, where you get married very young and you have many kids, and it's like, okay, you're 23 and you already have 5 kids or whatever, and then if you leave, you basically lose all of your rights, or your I can't recall the term right now, but your your rights to
your
supports, to see your children, because I mean, courts tend to side with the religious parent, unfortunately. So anyway, I just wanted to say that one.
Yeah, thanks for bringing that up, because that is something that I definitely work on with my religious trauma clients who are contemplating coming out as a non-believer to their religious family. And so there's a list of things that we go through to make sure, do you have this support in place? Do you have that? Are you beholden to them even for childcare or something? You want to make sure as best you can that you are taken care of before divulging this information that will quite possibly change or might even end your relationship with these people. So that's a really important point to make. And so I will remind people also that they can get in touch with me if they're looking for help with divorcing religion and building a healthy new secular life. Please go to my website, divorcingreligion.com, and just hit me up for a free 20-minute consultation. I'd be delighted to talk to you. Lonnie, it's been such a pleasure. Thank you for sharing your book with us.
This has been delightful.
Yeah, it's been really great. Okay, everyone, I'm going to include Lonnie's links in the show notes, and please take care. We'll see everyone again soon. Thanks again.
Thank you.